What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and we're back for another episode of the first-person shooter tutorial series. In this series, we've explored many topics, one of the latest of which was throwables. So in the previous few episodes, we've been going over throwables, and specifically we have created our throwable class with some of the basic behavior that it will need to have. And then we also updated our HUD to have two boxes here right now, which are just white squares, and they represent our different types of throwables. So some games will have like lethals and tacticals. Some games will just allow you to carry two different types of equipment or throwables. So in this case, I just had two different slots to demonstrate. In today's episode, I want to update this logic for a few things. So first of all, I want the image here to be populated or changed based on what type of throwable we have. And then I want the quantity to update with the number of throwable that we have. And I also want to resize the text box here so that it always fits, or move these over so that they don't interrupt the text box here. This should always be fully visible, and we'll do whatever looks better at the time. But by the end of this episode, we have a fully functioning HUD for our throwables, and that way in the next episode we can actually start using our throwables. So I'll be able to press a button and throw it. So that's what we're going to be going over in today's episode. If you want to get caught up in the series and see how we've done things like floating damage numbers, headshot damage, health bars, and a lot more, I'll link you to the entire playlist right here in the top right corner. Alternatively, if you just care about throwables, you do not have to watch the entire first-person shooter tutorial series to follow along. I would recommend that you watch the previous episode of throwables, because we are going to be continuing upon those episodes today. And so if you've already followed them, you'll be able to follow along with this logic perfectly. So I do recommend it. I'll link that in the top right corner right here. And with that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We are going to be doing most of our logic today in the blueprints, because we're going to be dealing with it in the widgets, specifically our character HUD. So first things first, let's go to our widget. So blueprints, widgets, character HUD. And when I come in here, I have my HUD, like we set it up in the previous episode. And one thing that I mentioned to you that I wanted to do right off the bat was make sure that this could not overlap with these. So one possible method, and actually the method I'm looking at, is simply moving these over. I know I manually placed these at an equal distance with these abilities in the previous episode, but actually I took inspiration from a few games, and they do not do this in a lot of games. It does not have to be even. Even though I was setting it up this way in the tutorial, it is not something that we absolutely need. And so I am going to move them a little bit closer to the right side here, which would pretty much take care of the issue on its own, but we can do a few other things to improve that as well. So first of all, I will move this to 300 and negative 500. So negative 300, negative 500. These are just arbitrary values that I picked, but I think it should be pretty solid. You can find a middle ground if that is not completely what you want. Like for example, if I want to go negative 540 and negative 340, that is an option. And when I come back into my game here and go in here, you can see the text will fit properly even at that value. And again, this is why I said negative 300, negative 500 for me, because I think this is going to look just perfect if we do it like this. So if I come in here, and that looks pretty darn good. Additionally, just for myself, I think they're a little bit too far apart. So I would say negative 450 might be better, or negative 475 or something, just to move them a little bit closer together, which I think will look nicer for most cases. And I'd say I'm pretty happy with that. Now that we got that simple design decision out of the way, and it looks cleaner, and we don't have things overlapping on the HUD, an alternative route that you could go if you really wanted to make sure that this always fit with these buttons and you wanted them at a very specific spot, you could choose not to size this to content, and instead you would change your size of this. So I can make this like 300, or let's make it a little bit bigger than that. Let's make it actually like 500. And then I would position this a little bit better, because right now my alignment is 0.0 on the X and 0.0 on the Y. If I make this 0.5 on both of these, and then take away my position X, I can keep the position Y. This is the true center of the screen for a box this large. So even if the text was full, it would still fit within this box. Change the text there just to make it a little bit more realistic. And now when I look at it like this, I can say, maybe I want to move these buttons over. So instead of 430, I'll make it 400. And instead of 580, I'll make it 550. And now you can see there is adequate space on the left and right side. And so when we go to a larger piece of text for a larger name and a weapon, it fits perfectly fine here. If we were to change the text to be even bigger, this is a set size. So say we start adding a bunch of characters in here, like exclamation marks, it would go outside of this. And if we choose to, we could make the text scale with whatever is in this box. So this would be the allotted size of our text. Now I'm going to get rid of these extra exclamation marks. And I'm not going to go over the scaling text right now because that is something we will have episodes on later, just like we did in a lot of our other series if you're familiar with that. But now you have a pretty solid method to make sure that your HUD is nice and clean, which is what I wanted to get at for today's episode. Continuing on with the throwables, if we go into the graph here and go to our functions, you'll notice we did not make any functions previously in the throwable episodes for our bindings for our images or our text on them. So these are both throwable slots is what they're called. So if we go to our content browser, go to widgets, go to throwable slot, we can go to the graph in here. We don't have any logic in here, which is to be expected, so I can go ahead and remove any of these nodes, but I also don't have any way to bind this data. We do need a way to set both the image and the text depending on fields that we want to have. So these are both variables, or they should be. Our image is a variable, and our text should also be a variable. Now we can bind these or set these when something updates to make sure we have the right image and the right count. So if I go into my graph here, I want to add event construct. So when this widget is created, we will try to set the values to some default based on what our character has. So if our character spawns with data for throwables such as grenades or throwing knives or whatever, we should be able to show this immediately. Now the character HUD, when it is spawned, if we go to our first person character, base character VP, and we go to our event graph, we can search for it. It should be in begin play here. And you see we are spawning the character HUD widget and we are getting the player controller and setting that as the owner. We can look at the character owned by this player controller and then grab data from that. When we have more players and player controllers that we have to worry about, this won't be hard-coded. It will be the specific player controller or player index, but that's perfectly fine. For now, we can assume 0 is okay. And so an event construct of the throwable slot widget, we can get owning player pawn. This will get the character that is being possessed by the owning player controller. And so it returns a pawn, and we can cast this pawn to our type. We can assume that this HUD is only going to be displayed on FPS tutorial characters, so that part is safe to do. And then we want to drag off of this and we can grab our throwable slot data. Now we have a few options here. We have our first throwable slot and second throwable slot. So how do we know which one we are in this widget? There's a few ways. We could pass it the data, or we could just set the value of this throwable slot on the widget since we know which one it's going to be and use the data based on that. And what I mean by this is if we go to our throwable slot and we add a variable and we will call this slot num. So that's the number of the slot, and we will make it an integer. If we make this instance editable and expose on spawn, this means we can set this value when we're creating this widget or when we're looking at it in another widget. So if I compile and save this and go back to my character HUD and click on my first throwable slot, you will see that there is a variable under default because we did not give it a category called slot num. I can either leave this to 0 or set this to 1 to indicate that this is the first slot. If you want to use 0 index or 1 index as your default, that is up to you. So we'll say slot num 0. And for the second throwable slot, I will say slot num 1. Then when I go to my throwable slot, I can check to see if slot num is equal to 1 or 2. And we can do this by just doing a simple switch statement. You could do a branch, you could do a select, you have a lot of options here, but we have our switch statement and we have the slot num variable. And you can drag off of your character class now and get first throwable slot. Should be a structure like this. And we can also get second throwable slot. For either of these, we probably want to break them or split them However, when I try to do this, I won't be able to. If I type break, nothing comes up. If I try and right click on it, nothing will come up. I can't split the struct pin. And that is because we have not set up our U properties on the variables in the structure. So if I go to Visual Studio and go to FPS tutorial character and go to F throwable slot, we have a blueprint type structure, so we can see the structure, but the variables inside of it are not U property. We need to make sure these are U property just like we would in a class. So U property, edit, anywhere, blueprint, read, write. We can give it a category, throwable slot. And we want to do this for both of our variables in here. And at this point, we will want to relaunch or live code or whatever the case may be. We can come back into our widget. So first person, blueprints, widgets, throwable slot. Go to the graph, and in here now we should be able to split the struct pin, which we can, or break it, which we also could do. So we have first and second, and if slot number is 0, we can use the values from the first. If it's 1, we can use the values from the second. Really all we want to do is just set our values for our text and our image. So if we grab our throwable type image, get it, we can call set brush on it. And the brush we're going to set is going to depend on our enum value. So we could make a map of throwable type to image, or we could have a hard-coded value. The best, in my opinion, is to make a map of it. So if we make a variable and call it throwable type to image or to brush map, we will convert this to a map. First of all, we have single array set and map. You can't do it with a boolean, but that's okay. We want to change the key to our type, which is going to be our enum, so e throwable type, and we can use that as the key, so we can make a map here. So you select map, and then the other thing, which is the value, is going to be our brush or an image. So specifically, the set brush takes in a slate brush structure. So we want to copy that, slate brush structure. We don't have to type structure, but just slate brush. You know it's a structure because it's blue. Now we have our map, and so we can manually put in some values in here. Right now I only have a frag grenade and a throwing knife, and if I try to add more than one, you can see it says I can't add more than one because one has the default value. So I've selected one with my frag grenade here, and I just need to associate an image with it. I can open up the frag grenade, and I can pick any image. So for now, because I don't have an image of this, and I need to make one, I can just go ahead and put the crosshair in here. And then if I add another element to the map, which I have to compile so that there's not a default value, then change this to throwing knife actually, so when we add one, the next one will be the default, which is frag grenade. A little silly, but we can get around that warning that was popping up. So now we have throwing knife is the crosshair, and frag grenade is going to be pretty much anything. It can be our FPS minimap render target image. That will work for now. We will replace these with the actual images later. But at this point, we can use the enum value from here, from first throwable slot throwable type, and put it into our map. So if we grab our throwable type to brush map and get it, we can then retrieve a value from here by typing find. And we pass the enum type directly into it. And the result will be the brush. So we pass that into the set brush. Now, this can be cleaned up drastically by making it a function and not repeating all these nodes, but for this episode specifically, it is fine. We will clean it up in the very near future. We don't need to use the branch here because we're going to assume for today's episode that whatever we pass it will exist and we'll have a mapping, and so the brush will now be set. And this is the same thing that we're going to do for the second slot, so you can copy and paste it for now. Again, should likely be a function, and we can do that. But I just want to show you what's going on here. So we have our second throwable slot, and that is going to be used to find the corresponding throwable in the map and set that brush on it. Then the other thing we have to set is our number of throwables. So this one's much easier. We have our throwable number text, and we can get it. We can set text, in parentheses, text on it. and we can manually pass in the integer for the first throwable slot into the text, and it will convert it for us to text integer is the node that it uses. And for the second throwable slot, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to pass that one into it instead. Also would benefit from using this function instead of setting up two different paths here, but I think you understand what's going on. That's what's important for now. And at this point, now these values will come in with the data that we have on our character. So when we play our game, as long as our character has values, and it does because we set them up in the previous episodes on Throwables, now it shows the image we selected for each type. So this is our frag grenade, this is our throwing knife, and this is the counter, 2 and 3. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode on Throwables and making them work in your game. Now that our UI and our HUD looks so nice, I'm ready to implement these Throwables, and I'm very excited to do so. It is a very fun mechanic, so I'm glad you guys have been enjoying it as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel and the series, then please subscribe and consider joining the Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriptions for added benefits along the way. Thank you so much to everyone who already has. If you ran into any trouble following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I would be happy to help you, and that support is completely free. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.